Hello, welcome to the True Crime Lounge, where we talk about different cases, typically from the killer's point of view. However, for this mini series, we are focusing on the victims in each case. This is the podcast to my YouTube channel. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also go and check out my merch shop as well. Now, let's grab our drink of choice and dive into the True Crime Lounge. And as we finish our mini series, we are going to be talking about the kidnapping of Jaycee Dugard. Next to Elizabeth Smart, this is probably one of the most known cases in the U.S. Dugard was kidnapped in 1991 at the age of 11, where she would spend the next 18 years in captivity by Philip and Nancy Garrido. Jaycee was born in 1980, and she grew up in South Lake Tahoe, California. And on June 10th, 1991, her world will change forever. When Dugard was only 11, she was kidnapped outside her home. Her stepfather, Carl Probin, saw the abduction through his garage window, and he attempted to chase the car down on his bicycle, but was outran. Probin would call the police and local authorities, and they were aided by the FBI in the search of Jaycee. Several dogs, aircrafts, hundreds of law enforcement personnel, but there to no avail. She would eventually be discovered living with Philip and Nancy Garrido, 170 miles in Antioch, California. Jaycee's kidnappers and her captors were um, convicted rapist Philip Garrido, where he would rape Dugard repeatedly. He would tell her countless lies and even impregnated her twice. She gave birth to both her daughters at age 14 and 17. Where she then she but she would also spend 18 years of her life in captivity, living in a backyard shack in a home of Garrido and his wife Nancy. That's 18 years. I can't imagine, like 18 years she can't get back. The only good thing that came out of that kidnapping was her two daughters. Anyway, back to the case. Dugard was locked in a makeshift recording audio studio by convicted rapist Philip Garrido and his wife Nancy in the backyard of their home. Renamed Alyssa, Dugard soon realized the major motive for her abduction. She was raped repeatedly by Philip, which resulted in two pregnancies. At 14, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter. 3 years later, at 17, she would give birth to her second daughter. Dugard spent more than 18 years in captivity with the Garridos, who fed her countless lies and largely prohibited her contact with the outside world. During this time, she wrote in the journal frequently, documenting deep depression, fear, loneliness, and the feeling of being unloved. She constantly wondered about her family and whether they were searching for her, but over time, and cut off from any relationship outside the Garrido home, the severely depressed victim grew up to cherish any. So she grew up to cherish any human interaction, even that from her kidnappers. She didn't know how to leave. After years of lies from her captors and her family's lack of love for her, she even wasn't sure whether she had anyone to flee to. So, the arrest of Philip and Nancy Garrido. Well, on August 24th, 2009, Philip visited the UC Berkeley campus with his and Jaycee's two daughters and inquired about holding a religious event. Suspicious of this behavior, the UCPD Special Events Manager had another officer conduct a background check, which revealed that Garrido was on parole for kidnapping and the rape with a registered sex offender. The follow-up was by calling his parole officer, who was surprised to learn that the Garrido had children. Mm. So, August 26th, Garrido attended a parole meeting with Nancy, Dugard, and their daughters. Garrido insisted that Dugard and the young girls were relatives, and Jaycee, who called herself Alyssa, initially covered for him. Eventually, Garrido broke down and confessed to his crime, enabling her to reveal her true identity. Shortly thereafter, Philip and Nancy were both charged with 29 felony counts, including rape and false imprisonment. So, she would return home. On August 26th, more than 18 years later after she was abducted, Dugard was united with her mother, Terry Probin, in South Lake Tahoe, California. Soon after the Dugard family learned from California Deputy Inspector General Dave Biggs that, due to Garrido's failed parole supervision, they would be awarded $20 million by the state of California. Additionally, Garrido was named a person of interest in another California kidnapping case. So, what about her memoir in her late life? Well, in July 2011, Dugard published a harrowing memoir, A Stolen Life, in her years spent in captivity with the Garridos. In March 2012, in an interview with Diane Sawyer, she spoke about her recent activity discussing the happiness that he had brought back that was brought back to her and her family, and they were struggling with learning how to be free. During this interview, she would recall being overly joyed after ordering pizza during a recent trip in New York City. Walking down the street with everyone was my favorite moment, she would go on to say. So, in 2016, she published a follow-up to her memoir entitled Freedom, My Book of First, in which she described her experience after years of captivity. She would go on to write, "There is life after something tragic happens. Life doesn't have to end it if you don't want it to. It's all in how you look at it. Somehow I still believe that we each hold a key to our own happiness, and you have to grab it, where you are, wherever it might be from." Nearly a decade after emerging from captivity, Dugard reflects on her life that she lost and the one that she gained. With her two daughters now in college, famed survivor and victim advocate focuses on the well-being and helping others with her foundation. Philip, so Gerardo is 68, is being held in California State Prison. So, 10 years ago, on August 26, 2009, Officer Stroud reported that he worked at the Concord Police Department because his experience as a school resource officer was asked to look after a woman who police stationed with her two young daughters. That woman, he soon learned, was Jaycee Dugard, who was 18 years before he had been kidnapped. At the time, she walked to the school bus in South Tahoe one morning and had not left since. Stroud, who clearly remembered the kidnapping and the national headlines that accompanied it, and he was shocked. So hours before Dugard The two girls and Dugard's captor Philip and Nancy Garrido had gone to Concord to meet Philip's parole officer. He had been released from prison a few years before she was kidnapped. At the parole office, Dugard told Officer that she was the girl who had disappeared in 1991. No kidnap victim in modern American history had been found alive after being missing that long. Philip Garrido was arrested, and Nancy, his wife and co-conspirator, was taken into custody. Soon after, the world will soon learn that Dugard and her daughters conceived as after she was raped by Philip Garrido had been forced to live in a ramshackle backyard compound at the couple's home in Antioch, where Dugard would later describe as a prison. Stroud would go on to meet the young girls, and who were noticeably quiet in a police interview room. I can imagine. So, he was one of the first officers that helped Jaycee and her daughters after 18 years of captivity. So, and he would even go on to say that I spent some time talking with them, getting them food, and trying my best to make them feel a little more at ease. I then met with Jaycee. I reassured her that her daughters were okay and taken care of. And while outside the police station, media outlets from all over were surrounding it. The girls were 14 and 11 at the time, and their mother came to their hotel room with only their clothes in on their backs. But for her youngest daughter, there was something badly missing: a 10-gallon heated aquarium containing a hermit crab she was raising, and she wanted it back. So, what did this officer do? Well, with the help of the officer in Antioch crime scene, then Tim Grayson went to go retrieve the aquarium and put it on a food cart, covered it in towels in the front hotel gym well into the family's room to their delight. That's amazing right there. The officer didn't have to do that. No, he did not. Um, but it was at the hotel later that day that Dugard saw her mother, Terry Provin, for the first time since the Garridos had shocked her with a stun gun and drove away in the car. Provin had rushed to Concord from Southern California after getting the news that she had been hoping for nearly 2 decades. I can't imagine, like, being kidnapped, held in captivity for 2 decades. I can't, and what her mom was going through, I can't imagine any of that. Her mom would go on to say, that my baby, and then hold her in her arms very tight. So, what about Dugard today? Well, today she and her nonprofit JAYC Foundation helps facilitate the same kind of family reunifications for other traumas. Drawing from Dugard's experience, the foundation, who aims to provide safe, secluded spaces for victims to recover, holds workshops for caregivers and puts a particular focus on the animal-assisted therapy. She turned to writing and eating for horses to help her heal. She would also go on to write that in the backyard prison Philip and Nancy created, I didn't really think too much about the next day, let alone the future. Just getting through the day was important to me. When we were rescued and I started therapy, I was a combo of past, present, and future that I had thought about. Nowadays, it's a lot like the future. It's not the only thing that makes her who she is, she would go on to say. So, Philip and Nancy, who orchestrated the kidnapping for almost 2 decades and kept her in captivity, even delivering her 2 children with no medical assistance, eventually pled guilty after going through a long string of court hearings in El Dorado County. Philip is now serving a prison sentence of 431 years to life in the California State Prison, Caracan in the Central Valley. Nancy is serving a 36 years to life at the California Institution for Women in Southern California. So, this would also, in her memoir, A Stolen Life, she would also say, the virtual isolation and sexual servitude they used to enslave Dugard is well documented in her memoir. If you guys haven't had a chance to check this out, I would advise you go check it out. It's actually really good. It's really good, and it just makes you like. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of survivors they do have a foundation. Like this, they find a way to move on and try to help others, become advocates. Really, Dugard now addresses the experience with resilience and has come to define her since she has emerged from captivity. She would also go on to say, what happened to me will always be a part of who I am, but I don't let that be the only thing that makes me who I am. I don't let those experiences of those people, meaning define the relationships in my life now. When I do have something in the past pop into my head, I don't shy away from it either. It's important to acknowledge that thought or feeling afterwards. When Dugard emerged from the public, the impacts were far-reaching. The parole system, which was supposed to thoroughly vet Philip Garrido compliance with his parole conditions after he imprisoned for her earlier for kidnapping and rape in 1970s, was lambasted for his lackluster home visits and minimum status checks. He had been designated a modern parolee. Videos of parole and later surfaced publicly showed Nancy badgering and frustrating agents to the point where they hurriedly left to get away from her, helping to keep their secret. So in her first memoir, Dugard would criticize the parole agents for lacking curiosity that might have led to discover far earlier, sparing her the 18 years of torment she endured. After the exposure of those lapses, the state parole system revamped its practices, and the state paid a $20 million settlement to Dugard for the repeated failures to find her soon after. But more broadly, her story has given hope to many families that are still looking for their missing loved ones. A few years after Dugard gained her freedom, 59-year-old Ariel Castro in Cleveland. I remember that case as well. I actually have research on that case I want to do. I'm planning on doing eventually. Anyway, 53 Castro was arrested in Cleveland, and it was revealed between 2002 and 2004 he kidnapped and imprisoned three women: Amanda Berry, Georgina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight, and then held them captive and freed in 2013. Today, she is committed to helping others. She has started the Jaycee Foundation, which has helped and held workshops to hundreds of kidnappings, sexual assault, and other trauma victims, as well as the law enforcement officers who were often the first responders to those cases. To her, the Foundation's first ever fundraising event scheduled in Sonoma County is a significant milestone. She would go on to say, we need to raise more awareness that therapy is okay. It's okay to seek help and you don't have to do it alone. So, what is the JOYC Foundation benefit? Well, by supporting it, it is supposed it will help with everything. But that's it for this last episode of the miniseries. Next miniseries will be called "I Almost Got Away with It," and we'll be starting season 2 here shortly of the True Crime Lounge.